down, Turbo. You'll get us killed. Again.
I've been meaning to do a video on Cyberpunk 2077 for months now. At launch 5 years ago, it was something of a dumpster fire. It was a broken, poorly optimized, crashy, incomplete mess that arose from the ashes of one of the most overhyped games in history. Simply put, Cyberpunk's launch was Tuesday in the games industry. It was a title from CD Projekt Red, the company that gave us The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, and that meant expectations were naturally high. And so I push forth this rhetorical question. What happens when high expectations meets Tuesday in the games industry? You guessed it, the internet descended into madness. Not only was Cyberpunk's launch atrocious, it was one of the most anticipated games of the year. It had the spotlight on it. People were very naturally unpleased. Even Sony started offering refunds. That tells you how unfit the game was. PlayStation really don't enjoy giving those. In other words, launch Cyberpunk was so pagged it became an accomplishment in its own right. This experience we should have been tucking into as a game changer was instead a joke, an incomplete, barely functional jest. And for me, 5 years ago, it proved ultimately unplayable. However, in the years since, CD Projekt have been hard at work at correcting Cyberpunk's course, and while I stand by the belief that nobody owed them the patience to spend years fixing a game they'd already released, credit where it's due, they've given it a proper whirl. And when I dived back into Cyberpunk earlier this year, I was kind of impressed, and finally I could see the goodness of the game beneath the scuff. But though it may be significantly improved from its launch state, it's still a flawed game. It's not just likeable now, it's lovable. The game may no longer crap itself in real time nor expose us to unexplainable penis physics, but my playthroughs weren't a tidy experience as it crashed every 2 hours routinely, and then gave me a nebulous brand-specific error message as opposed to giving me an error code I could then Google and find the one sod on Reddit who'd fixed the problem. The game still has its spectacular blips besides, but at the very least the game is clean enough that you can actually enjoy the game itself. And what a ride that is. Who doesn't want to play as a cybernetically enhanced mercenary with frequent hallucinations of a chain-smoking anarchist variant of Keanu Reeves? And the world. Night City is a visual wonder. Ignore this bloke's shadow, I don't think he got the memo the game is fixed. The world is absolutely phenomenal to explore, to soak in, to observe. There's so much for us to see and appreciate, and it's there for us to do so. And while I finally understand even like Cyberpunk 2077 now, I can't help but feel as if even now it's leaving a lot of itself on the table. Like at long last there is nothing short of a brilliant game here. But now I see the game regularly being hailed as a masterpiece, and honestly, I can't agree with that. I can understand where people making such arguments are coming from, and it's not like there aren't an abundance of masterfully executed aspects, nor would I presume to police somebody else's sensibilities. After all, I know I've called my fair share of questionable things masterpieces myself in my time on this platform, and I don't want to mislead you into thinking this video is going to be endless praise for a game I actually have a lot of things to say about that aren't necessarily of the praising variety, but if anything, Cyberpunk's present excellence makes it all the more frustrating that it can reliably hit that level while being quite sloppy with the small stuff, really. I will not deny this game's brilliance, but if anything, it's so good it highlights its own flaws. And if that sounds like pseudo-intellectual bollocks, allow me to dive into more detail. Because today, I'm finally revising my opinions on Cyberpunk 2077, because at launch it was a game I was incredibly harsh towards. To summarise my day one perspective, I didn't believe the game in that state was worth the time of day. Now's the time to actually give it the time of day. To talk about more than just the bugs, the glitches, the crashes, the performance, and give it the fair reshake in my opinion it's earned. Not to absolve it of its day one sins, but most certainly to appreciate and critique the game it is now. The game I've blissfully sunk the best part of 200 hours into. The game I've come to an understanding with. Cyberpunk 2077. Please enjoy.
Impressive cock.
To begin with, I reckon a great place to start will be to talk about the world, Night City, where the game thrives. This corporate dystopia packed to the brim with skyscrapers and high technology, where the quality of life for the average citizen is somewhere in the gutter. Cyberpunk is well and truly the genre as well as title. It's a futuristic, neon-swept city with flying cars, holographic billboards that rise into the heavens themselves, and people modifying their own bodies with cybernetics like it's the equivalent in this universe to getting a haircut. And away from the man-made horrors, we have the most redundant feats of over-engineering imaginable. Motion magazines, mirrors that are only usefully reflectant when turned on, road markings that flash and change dynamically. It's an exaggerated technological future straight from the imagination of the 1980s, and it's glorious. Night City is Cyberpunk 2077's greatest asset by a mile. The game gives us this visceral, immersive, highly detailed world where huge leaps in technological advancement have been achieved and accepted casually, to the point where the taboo of extreme body augmentation is just a thing more people seem to do than not. It's a rich, ultra-urban environment to serve as the platform for a deep dive into the idea of humanity getting lost in the increasingly device-oriented future. A city where technology and major corporations reign supreme. Human life is no longer valued when it's effectively indistinguishable from machinery. This is the staple of the genre. People just become resources, a consciousness at most whose body, time, and very life is beholden to the mercy of fiscal giants that don't value them. And if that sounds familiar, it's intentional. It's immersively delivered, as you can't look in any direction without receiving this message. It's also a world you wouldn't particularly want to live in, as it's characterized by a huge divide between those living at the top of society and the rest of the scum at the bottom. Everywhere you look, you're dominated by imposing billboards advertising conveniences, enhancements, or even plain bollocks. The ground-level human suffering disguised by the facade of the future built right on top of your head. The city's layout is intricate, with various paths to every place you can fathom. There's no wasted space, just detail in every direction, along every route for you to soak in and truly appreciate what absolutely feels like an authentic corporate hellhole masquerading as a thriving urban centre. And yet despite the mercilessness of this environment, human life still survives. The crowds are dense, there are markets all over, mega buildings full of people, there's rubbish everywhere. It's easy to believe that this could be an actual place where actual people live. Night City is convincing at the surface level. It may struggle for interactivity with regards to individual things, and I'll get into that, but overall, it thrives as a backdrop, and that's perhaps most important. Even preferable in a way for portraying a city that's completely apathetic towards us as we scurry around it like an insignificant ant, desperate to make a mark. A world needs an entry point though, and for us that's V. Vincent if you play as a male, Valerie if you play as a female, or Valicent if you play as a female with a cock that you can customize for some reason, or Vince, never mind. You can customize your penis in this game for reasons known only to the executives at CD Projekt, I assume. Only the circumcised variant has physics, implying foreskin functions as an anchor. But that's besides the point. We have some say in V's entry into the narrative in the form of life paths. We can choose to be a nomad entering the maw of Night City as an outsider, a street kid, meaning V's already in the heart of Night City. Or we can be a corpo, where V belongs to society's higher classes and becomes a merc for some reason. That's the one life path I'm yet to actually do. The life paths have sway on V's experiences that we can tap into routinely in dialogue, not that any of those moments are anything but skin-deep exchanges that unalter events besides, otherwise they only really alter the experience up until just after you've met Jackie Wells. From there the story forms up and that makes it a bit disappointing, but the alternative is an unattainable scope. Regardless of the life path chosen, V becomes a mercenary looking to make their mark on the world, on Night City, become a legend. You get the point. It's a story about the human desire to leave a mark on the world before we go, to leave a legacy, make an impact on those around us, be important, amplified by a world defined by the widening of the gap between obscurity and mattering. This leads us to undertake a lofty heist to steal a relic from Arasaka, to enter the big leagues, as everyone keeps saying. The heist obviously goes tits up, it's the start of the game, what more do you expect? Jackie is killed and V inserts the relic to preserve it, only for it to then wreak havoc on us, and our brain is now implanted with the digitized version of Johnny Silverhand's mind. And boy, he's a temperamental guy. So now we've got domestic terrorist variant of Keanu Reeves in our head slowly overwriting our own consciousness. And from here, Cyberpunk's story isn't about rallying against some big bad. It's not necessarily about friendship, kinship, or any other wholesome triumph of righteousness. It's simply about survival, both in general, in this brutal place, and as an individual grappling with the encroachment of mortality. That desperate fight against the inevitable gives us plenty of room to explore Night City's complexities. The social decay, the moral ambiguities, the individual loss of autonomy for the average individual in this world, with the complete dismantling of the notions of good and evil, the dissolution of humanity itself. In exchange, we're left with characters defined by pragmatism, weighing up consequences rather than clear-cut moral stances unfitting for human behaviour within a dystopia. As a result, the game delves into some very dark subjects in a casual formatting, like the idea of dolls being people who rent their bodies out for sessions, if you catch my meaning, using an implant to dictate their behaviour during the session, and wiping their memory of it afterwards to prevent psychological scarring. The individual is literally removed from their own body to be used at the complete discretion of somebody else, and that is a horrifying idea the characters are maneuvered to casually accept as just a thing that happens. It speaks to the complete loss of control many people in this world have over their own lives, as their throats are crushed by the corporations that dominate the skyline. Their bodies become but products, and their mind is able to be benched for a paying customer's benefit. Dolls aren't even present in their bodies to perceive what happens to them. They become a husk for an algorithm to dictate and satisfy another's fantasy. It's also symbolic of the broader world. The human body is a commodity, a resource. The actual human life it houses is an inconvenience. And this doesn't just apply to the unfortunate in Night City society. The whole Perales quest line is absolutely messed up with implications of mind control, and these powerful political individuals' entire lives being little more than a highly coordinated series of preordained events orchestrated by a mysterious shadowy organization whose agenda is unknown to us. We cannot help them. We cannot understand all the whys. We get questions as to why this is happening, but nothing in the way of real answers. But whatever the purpose is, we're warned off enough to know it's big. The human consciousness being inconvenient applies to many in Night City. The human life is irrelevant. Everybody's either a vessel or a potential vessel, a tool to be used for a purpose and little more. The wants and needs of the true individual are of no consequence. They must play their role. Aside from the autonomy topic, there are other haunting subjects the game touches down on. The idea of humans modifying their bodies to absolutely horrifying extents, for instance. The irresponsible over-application of cyberware is a fascinating topic in Night City. It's not just replacement limbs for those who have lost them. It's not just replacement organs curing incurable diseases. It's an excessive industry that's become a trend, and if anything, it's weird to find somebody without any augmentations at all. Despite how weird it's become to be a natural human, Cyberpunk still highlights those who have kitted themselves out to disturbing degrees. Look at the Maelstrom, who give themselves a very dehumanized aesthetic, looking more akin to tech-infused demonic creatures. They often come kitted out with a series of cybernetic eye-like implants, their noses are sometimes missing, their skin is extensively scarred, and it's hard to rationalize any single one of these guys ever looking like an ordinary human. Yet we have to accept they probably did. They did this to themselves, became these twisted creatures, and they're only the tip of the iceberg. Because then there are the full Borgs, like Adam Smasher, who is effectively a psychopathic brain in a jar, housed within a body-like cybernetic juggernaut that transforms what was once a human being into this very unhuman monstrosity that lives, if you can even call it living at this point, for combat. Adam Smasher is a petrifying concept. You dread standing a few feet from him, and while the game doesn't tap into his bogeyman aspect anywhere near adequately, the fact that a human has undergone becoming this vulgar weapon to be deployed at the whim of a tyrannical corporation inspires nothing short of dread. These full body conversions aren't uncommon, though Smasher is the most prominent example. There are many residents of Night City who have become almost entirely machine for a variety of purposes, their organic nature stripped down to the essentials and insulated within a new metallic suit, provoking the question, at what point does one simply cease to be human? The question gets even more interesting when you realise these full Borgs exist often out of choice rather than any particular need to become one. There's an entire quest line where we meet a musician, one of Night City's top celebrities. She's undergone a full-body replacement out of vanity. It's not just a trend, it's an outright fashion to be a robot, and that didn't come without consequences. What are the consequences of overindulging in cybernetics? cyberpsychosis. This idea that those who overindulge in cybernetic implants risk ending up going insane, losing control of their enhancements, resulting in some rather disturbing finds throughout the city as the extremes of this trendy, profitable augmentation industry is exposed for the messed up thing that it is. But that crippling impact it can have on what makes someone themselves, what allows them to be in control of their own bodies, of their own actions, is simply too irrelevant to the powers that be. But the implications of the place of the human body in this world, the place of the human life itself, isn't the only subject Cyberpunk tackles head on. Night City is crammed with thought-provoking events and ideas and genuinely chilling moments, with the blow only mildly softened by the cassette futuristic dystopia, if at all. It really enhances the world that its ambiguity is explored in every narrative moment possible, whether they be part of the main story or in the side content. I do think there are some missed opportunities in the blend here and there, but I also think what is there is phenomenal. And I'm not doing it justice, I know that. This is a world that clearly knows itself. It portrays itself not only convincingly and immersively, but it doesn't compromise on presenting itself as a place where humanity goes to die, where corruption thrives off of the suffering of everyday people, where the police are in the pocket of corporations, where said corporations can hire bloodthirsty cyborg maniacs to kill whomever without recourse, where autonomy has no seat at the table in the name of what's most profitable, and human bodies are exchangeable with commodities, mutilated, upgraded, transformed into more while simultaneously becoming less human. A prison of machinery that offers convenience and enhancement in exchange for one's natural form, in some instances to an extreme degree. All of this hidden under the lulling smokescreen of neon. It's a horrifying concept for a prospective future society, but for a storytelling housing it's utterly magnificent, mesmerizing even. Cyberpunk 2077's Night City is a gorgeous space. The city is absolutely something you can get lost in, and getting lost in it is absolutely the point. You are a cog in the cruel, dehumanizing machine that is this forsaken place. For some, that analogy is more literal than it is for others, as life within becomes a bleak struggle, either pulling you towards bowing before your corporate overlords, or towards the rampant criminal underbelly, with very little, if any, in between, and chrome augmentations in every direction. Night City is one of the most fascinating open worlds out there. Not on the level of interactivity as such, but because it provides a constant feed for the game's narrative theming, for the ideas it wants to explore. Cyberpunk 2077's open world is its biggest character, to tap into that overused adage, but it's certainly true here. Without it, no single event would hit anywhere near as hard as it does. This isn't a backdrop, it's not just an atmosphere factory or a GTA-style city for us to navigate to our heart's content causing chaos all the way. It's a dynamic machine that promotes a case study on itself, ensuring plenty of room or content is allocated to delving into the dark, despairing pits that define it. The entire story is about what it takes to survive this mess, never mind becoming a Night City legend. The ego certainly has its place, as V's desire to become a legend exists independently from V's desire to survive Johnny Silverhand's engram turning our brain into scrambled eggs. But on the topic of survival in this world, how much humanity does one have to sacrifice? How many people do we have to kill? How much destruction do we have to cause just to survive this ruthless concrete and neon jungle? And V's no chosen one, we're not special. Everybody who exists in this world is weighing up those things. So it's all the more interesting when perceived from such a perspective that characters, more as a written personality than as a living example, thrive here. The people of Night City are in constant struggle. The city is defined by a violent power struggle that benefits those in control, so it's at no risk of changing or calming down anytime soon. The gangs are rampant, the police are impotent to control them, mercenaries may pick up the slack one day, but also contribute to the criminal ecosystem the next. All the while their actions go unchecked, uncontrolled, and that creates a vicious cycle of brutality that penetrates every echelon of society here. The social issues of Night City are potent, but through it we still meet good people. People trying to survive maybe, those who stand to gain from Night City's volatile setup, those who yearn to do something about it. Despite the game having a hugely nihilistic perspective on humanity, we still find slivers of hope embodied by individuals who still, despite the system being rigged firmly against them, strive to make a dent in it. They manifest as a modicum of decency in an indecent world. These characters may only influence things in small ways. They may be actively fighting against the systems to make a difference, or they may just be good people within their respective remits, but finding examples of hope for humanity in this world really isn't all that scarce, and that manifests in a cast of truly fantastic characters. Sadly, the efforts they may or may not make are dominated by the noise of rampant capitalism on steroids, the cybernetic infatuation of the age, the profits to be made off of the suffering as it is. Night City is not a good place to live, but that doesn't mean good people don't live there. This gives us an array of fascinating great characters to care about, people to invest in that sucks us deeper into the world despite the world itself being intentionally miserable. There are shades of grey, there are even moments of goodness, though it may be buried under a pile of evil. Of the characters who aren't good people, many are redeemable, and this is highlighted by contrasting those characters against the darkness of the likes of Adam Smasher. Character work in Cyberpunk 2077 is some of the most believable, visceral and thought-provoking out there, and that plays a monumental role in selling us this world. Altogether, Night City is a hellhole, there's no denying it, but it's a glorious one for any fictional world. It conveys the narrative theming beautifully. It's otherwise aesthetically marvellous, but above all else it stands as a warning against the prospective course of humanity potentially parting with what makes us human in the name of profits for the few, but survival for the many. On this point alone, I will give the notch of masterpiece because Night City is one. And perhaps its most compelling feature is the fact that we're not trying to save it. After all, how can we? So as a world, Night City is nothing short of marvellous, but how does it fare as a game? Well, not too bad. Cyberpunk 2077 is an RPG, a role-playing game, meaning it's a game highly influenced by the player's choices rather than us being an interacting passenger. We have sway on the moment-to-moment of V's life. We customize V. We choose V's path, both in the life path misfire for a start point, and we build V up to become the class of character we please over the course of the game through leveling up in the skill point systems and fitting cybernetics we deem most appropriate for our needs. We choose how V interacts with the world and its characters through dialogue, who V helps to an extent and who V romances most certainly. Cyberpunk isn't just a narrative we observe with bits of gameplay in between, though there's most certainly a huge place for those in gaming. It's a life we live through the proxy of V via the first-person perspective. It's our choice to decide how deeply we explore something or when to walk away from it and explore something else, and that gives us the ultimate sense of control over V as an individual. We have the executive control to influence the outcomes of many events, and where we don't, we're often fed the illusion that we do. In other words, it's a deep, rich dish of player choice at the forefront. It fits the bill of a role-playing game quite nicely, but that doesn't necessarily automatically mean how that comes together is going to be perfectly executed. I think Cyberpunk probably got most aspects of itself right here. Not that 2 playthroughs is ever enough to grasp the scope of what's possible in a competently executed RPG, but you get the idea. The progression system is leagues ahead of CD Projekt's previous outing, The Witcher 3, where you could only really activate so many perks at a time, otherwise leveling became an exercise in gaining XP to meet a level gate and little more. Cyberpunk doesn't promote complacency the same way, by still prescribing value to unlocking perks, even if most of the perks alter stats more than anything else. You get 2 kinds of points for leveling up. An attribute point you can assign to an attribute class to increase the rating of that particular facet of skills, then a perk you can assign to any of the skill trees under these umbrellas. Where on the tree the perk can go depends on how advanced you are with that attribute. This promotes committing to a playstyle, as you won't level up enough in one playthrough to max every attribute, and need to max at least one to access the best abilities. Therefore, there's actual choice in leveling that doesn't need a low undo barrier like The Witcher to function. These attributes and skills then dictate what is most proficient for you. You then play the game in accordance with the skills and attributes you're most invested in, and provided you've got some brains, which remains to be seen for me, you should benefit the most from committing to a playstyle. If you want to be physically powerful, you'll invest heavily in the body. If you want to be fast and agile, you'll invest in reflexes. If you want to go for the tech-savvy netrunner, you'll invest heavily in technical ability and intelligence. And if you want to be a stealthy guy, you'll invest in cool. because it's cool. It's not uncommon to opt for a hodgepodge, and there's even a point where you most certainly will have to, as you amass more attribute points than can be allocated to unlocking the scope of any one skill umbrella. The added benefit of that is you can blend certain styles together, give it some unique flavour. It also means there's no strict doctrine dictating you micromanaging your skills, and if something doesn't work out, you can always reinvest it. The point, however, is made that the best way to build your character is to invest in what's most important to you, the player, than merely combining some perks for a fringe benefit and building a class that can never be too powerful in any particular area. In Cyberpunk, you can become powerful at what you choose to specialise in, but the game requires you to commit to it somewhat, invest in it over time. Not to necessarily see night and day results right away, but to develop a class of skills over time to truly become formidable in that field, and that gives an inherently contrived game system an immersive finish as you get more used to being V handling business in this dystopia, and V also gets used to handling business, so the ultimate endpoint is a force of nature capable of insane feats, both for V narratively and us in the gaming sense, and that makes it more than just unlocking skills, because that's just how the game is strung, and that's another positive it has over The Witcher, where we play as a monster slayer with decades of experience, who only just learnt how to flourish his sword because we unlocked a skill in a menu. A game has never sold itself to me, however, on the premise of being an RPG, or even taking core RPG elements like progression and scattershotting them into any which game. It isn't all that interesting, but Cyberpunk does it right. It's a means through which commitment to a playstyle is rewarded in gameplay, but being a jack of all trades isn't unnecessarily punished either. Sure, you might limit yourself somewhat in certain scenarios by wanting to sample a bit of everything, but you will also want the overlap in making V well-rounded as is necessary for these mean streets. Furthermore here, the gradual unlocking of perks and gradual improvement to V's ability actually makes some narrative sense. So it's not a leveling system because that's just one of the many things that RPGs tend to have, and it also doesn't necessarily dictate where you can and can't go in the world. The build system actually gets deeper again with cybernetics. Not only can we grant V skills and abilities through leveling, we can enhance V physically with augmentations by frequenting a Ripper dock to install and upgrade cyberware, with plentiful choice to mold the build we prioritize, but it isn't a game of going nuts. Hence, cyberpsychosis plays a role here. We have a cyberware capacity we must not exceed. There's a perk we can get that allows us to marginally surpass it, but doing so has some consequences, like a drop in overall health, among other things. Which means, particularly in the early game, we have to balance our kit and not overindulge as the limit gradually increases across a playthrough. Cyberware can also offer armor stats, improve our stealth, stamina, speed, mitigation, whatever that is, on top of potentially offering unique abilities such as gorilla arms that make our punches super powerful, or mantis blades that give us retractable swords in our arms. I'm a bit of a boring sod when leveling in these kinds of games. I tend to prioritize making my character a bit of a unit, ensuring through upgrades to health and armor that damage becomes little more than a flick on the nose. Meanwhile, I'm kitted out to slaughter, and Cyberpunk allows me to do that. Sure, that's an easier playstyle to actually accommodate, and that certainly makes it attractive, but the testament of good gameplay is that it'll find means to encourage you out of that shell while simultaneously satisfying it. This is where the benefits of other playstyles or portions of them really come to the fore, to mold something that suits the player in a more bespoke way to give flavour to your chosen primary experience. I'm not as deep into RPG gameplay on the whole to actually notice where the game deviates fully, depending on what you choose, and I only see a couple of playstyles dominate the YouTube scene, those being combat and combat, shoot everything or grab a sword and slash everything, both of which have their merits. I like the combat gameplay. It feels really fluid when you start using all your arsenal in tandem, switching weapons rather than reloading, throwing your ever-replenishing surplus of grenades to deal massive damage, or cause a distraction to avoid taking damage in order to reload, heal, or land cheap shots. Melee feels good, especially with a katana in hand, though I could never get the hang of the intricacies of the mantis blades to make them feel great, but I appreciate they don't eat up one of the 3 weapon slots besides, and therefore always carry them for tight encounters with damage sponges or armies of goons. And if I get bored of them, I can swap them out with gorilla arms, or maybe something else. Then there's net running that gives you the ability to quick hack mid-combat, so you can disrupt an enemy's vision, cause their implants to overheat dealing damage, cause them to short circuit, again dishing out massive damage, or indeed later in the game layer up these quick hacks for spectacular results. And then there's the stealth that probably serves as the problem area for every approach being viable, based on the non-stealthy encounters the game pushes. I think stealth in Cyberpunk feels fantastic. You can sneak up on enemies, grab them, knock them out, or snap their necks depending on how ruthless you want to be, then dump their bodies in containers. Or you can fit a silencer to your guns and take them out from range, which also does the job nicely. You can hack cameras to shut them down, hack computers to shut down entire security systems, hack vending machines for easy money, though that's not really a stealth thing as opposed to just a general thing you can do. It's great fun though to be a sneaky guy in Cyberpunk, and with the right perks and abilities there's an awful lot you can get away with. For the vast majority of action scenarios, you are equipped to handle them however you please. And it's good to have such a variety of systems available to truly make the playthrough your own and play the game how you think works best for you. If anything, that encourages outside the box thinking. What blend of attributes, perks and cyberware are going to work best for me? How is that going to apply to the game? And then experimenting. As a result, you can formulate an approach that complements you. But the area that struggles the most to live up to that are the boss fights. Boss fights are naturally how RPGs and many games like to draw you into the moment, bring emphasis to a specific enemy for narrative purposes, and they're good fun because they don't conk out as easily as your average thug, and they pose a higher threat to us. Cyberpunk's boss fights don't much encourage thinking outside the box. You're just shooting an enemy and watching a health bar tick down. Maybe your environment makes for a cool arena to house the fight, but the fights don't necessarily scintillate in the same way. There are a couple of good boss fights in this game off the top of my head, Oda and this big lady named Sasquatch, because both of these encounters amount to more than headbutting contests, and throughout the Cyber Psycho saga they do the job. But there are also some pretty boring, even underwhelming boss fights, like Adam Smasher. With Smasher, I don't know if it's because he's played up to be some unstoppable force throughout the story as we narrowly avoid being pulverized by him multiple times, and therefore no fight that we, the player, are supposed to win could ever do him justice. But something feels missing about this culmination of action-packed gameplay, and I think there are multiple layers to that. I think it's incredibly limiting that it's framed as a head-on fight, even if throughout the entire playthrough you've prioritized stealth, and while you can slink away and with the appropriate ability sneak up on Smasher after the fact, I think it misses the point of why you might opt for a stealth playstyle to begin with, to avoid a head-on confrontation, and boss fights are often as head-on as they get. Stealthing that requires you to break the line of sight and remain unseen by a foe who knows you're there, meaning to an extent you're already compromised and have to fall back on your arsenal rather than make a choice to slip past. The game understands this with Sasquatch. For some reason the monstrosity is hard as nails, but you can avoid her and not fight her at all. And I chose to do that because Christ, she's tough. Even if I don't chiefly opt for stealth, it became sensible there. But Smasher has to be a confrontation. I get its narrative emphasis, and of course a showdown with Smasher was inevitable. After all, he's the last thing early game you wants to fight head on, so the late game you has no choice but to. But not only is the prick quite easy to beat in a one-on-one, to the point where it's a bit of a joke when you compare him to other portrayals of Smasher's prowess, it's a missed opportunity to reward us for being stealthier by giving us a means to not go toe-to-toe with the universe's most feared killing machine. But it isn't just that. No gameplay fight we have to overcome because we're the player is going to do justice to the sheer ferocity of this psychopathic cyborg. It's not about the challenge, it's the fact that we have to face this figure and hold our own, but not only that, defeat him, dismantling the legend more and more by the second as the player batters him into a crippled lugging fireball with a dildo. It's a missed opportunity to play into the terror this guy instills, have us evade Smasher, somehow manage to escape him, even if only barely, really play into the terror of his existence, in a way the side quest hunting him for Johnny kind of does, since while you are looking for him and he never shows up, you dread the prospect that he might, and breathe a sigh of relief when the quest ends before you're pulverized into strips of deli ham. The game is excellent at building up a running suspense as you continuously manage to narrowly avoid coming face to face with him, with no chance at escape, only for the time when you do come face to face with him to be a bit flat. And that's before you factor the challenge of fighting him not even being that hard when compared to the likes of Big Hammer Lady, even if you get significantly stronger by the time you actually face Smasher, which is a common retort. But I think the disparity in V's power between these moments is obscured by the fact these are different opponents, and therefore it doesn't really matter. I'm not a sucker for difficulty, but if there was a boss fight to make challenging, it would be Adam Smasher and not Big Hammer Lady. But above all else, Smasher's fight proves the boss fight setup in Cyberpunk 2077 wasn't as creative as it could have been. But I get that my suggestion would also be limiting, so I propose a different solution. Have Adam Smasher be an optional fight. We can choose to face him, we can choose not to. Have him appear in the ending, but be searching for us. Have him goad us with his synthetic sailor's mouth, Johnny encouraging us to end him. Let us decide if we really want to risk becoming bloody paste for the sake of pride, and then you can make the fight bloody difficult. Maybe even have it end before Smasher can be dealt with, leaving his fate ambiguous rather than just another player choice, and us feeling grateful we survived. Or we can just opt to not face him at all, avoid fighting Smasher by remaining hidden, and just carry on knowing he could be right behind us. Let us sit with the fear of him rather than tackle him as an enemy. This would give us the options to not dismantle the legend literally as well as figuratively, while also allowing us to choose how we wish to handle an encounter with him that grants us leave to feel like V has become a legend because we survived the unsurvivable, while vindicating the chosen playstyle without taking a massive turd on quite possibly the scariest character in the game's fear factor, especially for the sake of an action-packed epic confrontation the narrative otherwise feels above. Apologies for the tangent, but I do find lots of games funnel you into scenarios that fit some playstyles over others, often at the expense of enjoying a unique scenario earned by committing to a less direct approach. In Smash's case, it's the biggest example. Perhaps because the fight doesn't bother to really reach its potential whichever way you approach it, being a combat machine makes easy work of him. Hacking him to pieces also makes light work, but stealth requires extra steps because a boss fight is oriented towards an outright fight, and I think considering how that particular example of a boss fight comes at the expense of the integrity of that particular character, and depending on how esoteric your weapon choice, the dignity, or however much he's got left, there could very well have been other means through which a final showdown with such an unstoppable force could have been handled. Especially when the game actually handles a mid-game boss fight in such a way that allows stealth players to not break their style and slip past. All you'd need for Smasher is a way to guarantee the occasion, and you're set, since this is the final moment of intense gameplay in the game, and it realistically should have lived up to itself more anyway. I know there are ways you can make it exponentially harder for yourself and turn it into more of a milestone to overcome, but having to go out of your way for that doesn't really do much for the casual experience, and that encompasses the bulk of players. So overall, the true issue is boss fights often come and go without a sense of occasion. They just have big health bars and deal slightly more damage, but outside of some exceptions, these events can pass rather unexceptionally. Nonetheless, the gameplay systems are still quite fun. Combat, hacking and stealth all feel fantastic, and all the systems feel like they possess depth despite obvious choke points, and that fluid satisfaction keeps you enjoying the game even when the content isn't always the strongest, not that it's that way as a rule. Cyberpunk has plentiful, meaningful content. Loads of things to do here in Night City, as you'd imagine. No job is the same as the last. Maybe you're helping powerful political allies uncover a conspiracy involving their minds being controlled. Perhaps you're nailing a guy to a cross in a wasted attempt to bring Night City closer to God, tracking down a serial killer. Maybe you're aiding a friend in their own endeavours to secure their loyalty. And my god, if the game doesn't compel you to treat this sheer volume of side content as main content. Cyberpunk's side stuff is great when it's great. It's just as rich, deep, and impactful as any main quest, but not all of the content hits this bar. Not all of it needs to, I'll say that first and foremost, but when you start looking at gigs, things go downhill quality-wise quite strongly. The gigs are the bulk of the money-making jobs we could undertake here in Night City, where, for some fixer, we carry out tasks. These tasks are ordinarily incredibly straightforward. Tracking down cyber psychos I suppose qualifies, though those offer very interesting mini-stories for each cyber psycho, complete with a battle where you have to face off against their particular enhancements. I'm more talking about infiltrating strongholds and taking somebody out or stealing something. You get it, basic quests you have to do to kill time, to XP farm, and to amass some eddies to buy some cyberware. Maybe a new apartment, gather upgrade materials to enhance your gear. Every so often, one of these quests justifies itself more than you anticipated, which keeps them from being too dull. But most of these gigs are just objectives you can reasonably, mindlessly do in passing. And while I get V's role as a mercenary in this vicious hierarchy is likely to result in very impersonal jobs, said impersonal jobs can also be implied to have happened in the time between meeting Jackie and unmeeting Jackie, to allow the content to laser focus on V's present mission and the people V cares or comes to care about. As a result, when traversing Night City, it's very easy to find yourself spammed with phone calls. I mean one after the other spammed with phone calls, telling you to go to X place to do Y thing over and over when you reliably hit a threshold of closeness. The trouble with a futuristic setting, factoring the prominence of the phone, is the game no longer needs to find a way to integrate these quests as things you pick up from a notice board, or an in-person conversation. You can just be summoned at will, non-stop, on your phone, meaning your exploration of Night City is frequently interrupted by Regina, Padre Wakako, and Mr. Hands, and I choose to believe CD Projekt knew exactly what they were doing when they called this man Mr. Hands, to name a few. They often call if a job is nearby. If there's something they'd like you to do in passing, they'll bell you up. Sometimes you can't even ignore the call. For me, the most annoying aspect of this delivery mechanism is the constant flow of information can be very overwhelming. That being said, on my second run through, I didn't find it to be as bad, as I did a lot of gigs for Regina before committing to the initial heist, and that seemed to clean up a lot of the map for me. But if the solution to this overwhelming barrage of quest provision is to just do the quests, then we need a new strategy here. Especially since a lot of these gigs are unnoteworthy as independent experiences, primarily existing to plug a gap between all the heartfelt content and the sheer amount of leveling you need to do. The high quality side content more than makes up for it, so the abundance of drop-in drop-out gigs do not hamper the game's excellence. After all, just because they're narratively flat doesn't mean they're thrown together. They often provide plenty of room to hit your stride, having installed fresh cyberware. They allow you to test out new approaches, new weapons, and test yourself with unique infiltrations, and that's better present than not. However, they're just not engaging for being the activity that dominates the map most, and having us be phoned every time we come close to a gig location is silly. Not only does it nuke our phone non-stop, it implies all the fixers in Night City are monitoring our precise location all day every day, waiting for us to come close to their desired job, only to call us when we do, and then give us details via text as if that didn't scream high volume content enough already. Also, it removes us from the urgency of Johnny Silverhand slowly assimilating with our minds, and the existential threat to V that poses. Are we to believe that V, while grappling with this esoteric terminal illness, somehow has the time to carry out dozens of these tasks? Then there are the NCPD tasks that crop up in passing. You do them for a little reward, but they're even more meaningless again. Neutralize some criminals, get paid, come back tomorrow and do it all over again. Why would V bother with random shootouts, much less get paid for it? I mean, sure, have them pop off at random in random places for world building purposes, but we don't need them marked, nor do we necessarily need a reward for choosing to get stuck in. That doesn't subtract from the content that truly hits the mark. The game knows how to suck you in. The more bespoke side quests are deeply captivating, and the game is worth it for that. Hell, it's worth it for Johnny Silverhand's interjections that crop up reliably. That entire relationship gives significance to every single moment, regardless of whether or not it's leading to a dead end in the narrative. And of course, the fantastic world space we do get to explore. But yes, missed opportunities to explore itself deeper are abundant too. The gigs are an example. They could have been built like Witcher contracts in The Witcher 3. Well, they didn't have to be special, but they all could have presented their own flavour and variety that made you compelled to do the next one. Another example of this problem is how gangs behave in the world. For the most part, the gangs kind of exist as static albeit unique concepts, with them appearing more frequently in particular districts, seldom interacting with other gangs or you outside story moments and quest cameos, or indeed random street gunfights that are appropriately meaningless. Your actions don't dictate how certain gangs behave towards you, and sometimes they just attack you for fun in the street, or chase you down in a car, having appeared from quite possibly nowhere. But they could easily have had a more dynamic role in the world, and content where certain decisions might impact the criminal power balance in Night City, and other choices might dictate which gangs are friendly towards you and which are hostile. There was so much room for them to be more, and they aren't. They're interesting enough, through unique design and establishment, but where do they go from here? Another missed opportunity for Cyberpunk to be more expansive that I've already alluded to are the life paths. To say life paths in Cyberpunk don't matter wouldn't be entirely fair. They do offer a unique entry point depending on which life path is chosen, they offer unique dialogue to flavour the experience depending on V's background, and they offer the odd unique quest here and there, and that's all great, but when it comes to deeper impact, once you get past the narrative's initial steps, they largely make minimal difference to most of the game. The thing I want to compare it to the most is the backstory in the Mass Effect trilogy. It gives a bit of flavour for where the character is coming from, what experiences the character has had before we inhabit them, but in both setups, choosing from a limited assortment of backstories has negligible impact on anything that happens in the story, and only serves to narrow the RPG element that is coming up with your character's backstory for yourself. Because if that's how the game was strung, you could choose the dialogue depending on the backstory you'd crafted in your mind, which is infinitely more appropriate for an RPG when you compare it to choosing a backstory and then hoping you like it. After all, for the most part, the backstories being present can only ever fade into a token detail. Cyberpunk did well to ensure the backstories, the life paths, were not entirely irrelevant. Dialogue options dictated by your chosen life path crop up all the time. They do matter to the point that they alter things and bring their unique moments to the table, but their impact isn't so significant as to be efficient. In other words, they could have and perhaps should have mattered more than they ultimately do. As things stand, the life paths do hold roleplay value, but so does making one up for yourself. Either way will be the ones assigning the bulk of meaning to it, and I've never met an avid RPG enjoyer without an imagination. From there, I suppose it's a matter of preference if you prefer to have them or not, and the value, while not entirely lost in translation, is limited by itself. There are some other things I see routinely brought up as flaws in Cyberpunk 2077's overall setup. For instance, the driving, which I oddly have no criticisms for, at least when it's us driving. I find being a passenger to be a stressful experience due to the abruptness of motion, and with a new auto-drive feature it's nice to just sit in the car and let it take you wherever. But I also like taking control, riding motorbikes, and of course that gorgeous Porsche 911, even if I did somehow manage to get it to crash into the 40th floor of a skyscraper. Then there's the loot system. There's a lot of loot in this game, but not a lot of it is of value. Sure, guns are able to be acquired from vending machines. They're abundant and serve to clutter your inventory, prompting to dismantle them for upgrade resources, which are quite handy. Cyberware capacity upgrades are good, and then there are the shards every so often that serve to fill your mind with lore. Can't go wrong with that. Overall, it's very uncommon you'll find loot actually interesting within itself, and you'll be doing a lot of it, but it's valuable to pick up as much as you can and dismantle crap guns for the resources, or indeed sell them for Eurodollars. It's a non-special system, but it's not exactly a bad one. But one thing I see brought up that I do quite agree with is the world's general interactivity, which serves to be quite a quality pit for Cyberpunk. I'm sure this was a big point of disappointment with respect to the game because Night City is such a compelling space to play in, and the story complements it magnificently. But when you're actually walking through the streets, aside from the odd conversation to listen in on, Night City really stumbles on the interactivity point. You can't exactly live vicariously through V like you can with Arthur Morgan in Red Dead Redemption 2, and while I get those games are incomparable, I do see the point that people want to immerse themselves to that extent here. Night City doesn't allow you to interact with it as much as would be ideal, nor in all the intricate ways to make it feel entirely alive. There are certain things you can do, but the simple things tend to get lost. Simply sitting in a diner, enjoying a nice meal, sitting on a bench and soaking in the vibes, maybe checking out some of those street food places that are all over. Those little actions that prompt you to slow down and immerse yourself in any given environment do go wanting unless specific to a storytelling moment, and that, while it doesn't massively harm what is a fantastic game anyway, is noticed in a world that compels you to be a part of it so completely, and then doesn't reliably provide you with the tools to do that. Sure, you can sit in your apartment, watch TV, go through the spam inbox on your emails, look out the window and simply take in the magnificent view. You can bell up your mates and have simple conversations, engage in text conversations with some dialogue choice sway, but beyond where it might functionally contribute to something grander, or just happen to be somewhere where that interaction is necessary, the immersive features the game actually frustratingly has built in have a tendency to inconsistently manifest. The most you'll get is if you're close enough to an NPC, you can press a button to talk to them, and their dialogue tends to have nothing to do with what they're actually doing. It's very jarring to be told to go away by every street vendor. Do they not want the custom? I get that we can't actually buy anything from them, that's not in the game, but that's besides the point. When you prompt them for dialogue, the NPC's dialogue should correlate with what they're doing or their placement in the world at the very least. For instance, prompting a street vendor should result in them responding with dialogue, trying to sell us stuff regardless of whether or not we can buy it. Sure, there are plenty of NPCs for whom it isn't terribly jarring for them to tell you to simply go away, or indeed to give you some generic dialogue for interacting with them, as many are simply walking through the world or otherwise standing still doing nothing. But there are also plenty whose dialogue is so grossly disconnected from their present activity that you can hear the fabric of the experience crumbling while they speak. And that is one of Cyberpunk's biggest issues. When Night City is immersive, it's immersive. You don't feel like you're playing a game, rather exploring a highly detailed, futuristic city, and the storytelling isn't afraid to put it under the microscope and explore its intricacies in a very dark depth. But try and exert any control over the microscope, and results are far more inconsistent. We've still got a layered, magnificent vertical environment. On the impressive visuals alone, it never gets old. But when you are where you have no reason to be explicitly, it's very easy to remember that this just is a game world. And that's only really a problem in a game good enough to sell the illusion of being more. And Cyberpunk 2077 is so good that it draws attention to its hairline cracks. Look at the romance system. Once you've successfully romanced a character, they updated the game so that you could invite them round to your apartment, and the dialogue is just the dialogue you'd have with that character over the phone. It's quite funny. Is this what dating with Alzheimer's feels like? I mean, the romance system in general is pretty skeletal. The options change depending on if you choose male or female V, but you only have two. And their variety consists of asking the question, are you gay? Beyond that, the only choice you make is, do you romance a character or do you not bother? Sure, they have their own quest lines and you can easily mess them up, but it's not really a system when your preferences only lead you to one option. It's more like a choice tacked on in a quest that otherwise exists. Thankfully, it's very far from an important part of the game. And the main thing is, when it comes to the important stuff, Cyberpunk 2077 gets most things bang on. The flaws that it does have don't inhibit the game from having a brilliant open world, and an excellent main narrative that truly fits the role of being a genuine driving force through the game. Cyberpunk 2077 may not be perfect. It may never be a perfect title. It may still have its blips and errors, slight mismatches of how the game functions, but overall it is still an utterly incredible experience now that the game isn't actively self-destructing at every opportunity. CD Projekt didn't have to fix the launch Cyberpunk. I mean, morally they did, but they'd released the game. They could have easily buried their heads, waited for people to forget about it, and then worked on the next thing. The damage the release did was pretty hefty, and it did cause mayhem on their reputation, but they stayed the course. They kept polishing the game up, including new features to make it even resemble the idea they clearly had, and then there's the DLC, Phantom Liberty, which I think I'll save for its own video. It's absolutely gobsmacking, even if it does showcase a ton of improvements over ordinary Cyberpunk that highlight why the game is not in fact the complete experience even now. Ultimately, I don't just like Cyberpunk 2077, I think I kinda love it. I don't view it as some paragon of perfection, but it's such an immense world that genuinely slaps you with visual impressiveness in every direction, has storylines that can show the best and worst of humanity, Genuine, hard-hitting quests are not rare. The game strives to make an impression on your mind at every opportunity, to the point where when it doesn't quite accomplish that, you notice. It's a treat to play it now, and a lot of what makes this game truly good was never explicitly missing, which goes to show how catastrophic a dodgy launch can be. So, there's my revised perspective on Cyberpunk 2077. I don't think perfection is on the cards for it ever, though Phantom Liberty is pretty golden. I'm sure I'll get round to a video on it someday in the not too distant future. But for now, I'd like to thank you for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to go ahead and leave a like, maybe subscribe, share the channel with your friends, all that wonderful stuff. It would be massively appreciated. And with any luck, I'll be seeing you all very soon with another video at some point. Until next time, take care, and goodbye.